Welcome to CXWise, where we share wisdom, insights, stories, and expertise from the world of customer experience. I'm your host, Nathan Bennett, and you're about to hear real-world experiences and practical advice that will elevate your CX game, no matter your title, no matter your industry. So, without further ado, let's get wise. My guest today is Brianna Langley Henderson. She's a seasoned marketer with over a decade of experience crafting compelling stories for brands. Currently, she's serving as the marketing manager for Bailey International and pursuing an MBA. Bri holds a double major in communications and political science. She's passionate about sustainability. She led an initiative integrating paper cups into Chicago's recycling system, significantly boosting paper and fiber recycling. Her impactful contributions have been featured in publications like CMSWire and Waste 360. She's not just a rock star marketer, she's a super mom, an engaging speaker, and an advisory board member for Sprinklr Media Group. Welcome to CXWise, Bri. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. What an intro. You guys really do your research.
Well, speaking of that, I want to get down to the nitty-gritty of why our listeners tune in. But before we do, I want to define our terms a little bit. I always like to hear what our guests think of when they think of customer experience. So, Bri, how would you describe customer experience as we know of it today?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's the very traditional cookie cutter. It's how customers think and feel about your brand. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. But the way I always describe what I do to people is I say that I examine every major intersection that a customer has with a brand, which when you think about it, there's quite a lot. That includes advertising, website, chatbots, obviously CSR scripts, the whole gambit, right? And I like to analyze each one of those processes by themselves and make sure that A, they are as efficient and as streamlined for the employee on the other side of that interaction as they are for the customer. I like to take a very holistic approach to customer experience. I'm a big believer that if your frontline employees or the employees who are communicating the most with your customers are having a, can I curse on this?
Yes, please do.
Having a shitty experience, then your customers, like that energy is very transferable.
Right.
So you're already setting it up for your customers to not have a good experience if you're not taking care of your employees on the other side. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of digital touch points that customers have, but somewhere along that line, whether you're speaking to a robot, a chatbot, or an employee, there's going to be a human that influences that interaction. So we really want to make sure that those humans are taken care of and having a good experience. I believe that translates directly into the experience that the customer will have.
It's interesting that you brought up all of these different touch points and intersections. I like that you said intersections because that's what we're seeing a lot of today with advancements digitally, with AI. How does that AI enhance personalized customer experiences at scale? And are there brands that you can think of that might be excelling at it?
First of all, the two greats, Amazon and Netflix, they were the ones doing this before this was cool. They were pioneers in this intersection of AI and customer experience. They've done an excellent job at honing their algorithms over time to be able to capture what each individual customer is most likely to buy or watch. So I think there's certainly something to be said for being the first of this new breed of business. Sure. But another brand I've really taken notice of is Sephora. Sephora is really utilizing a pretty sophisticated form of AI to recommend personalized beauty products that offer virtual try-on experiences based on your skin tone, your preferences, your purchases in the past. I know other players in the industry are picking this up now, but Sephora was one of the first that I really personally took notice of.
That's great. I had no idea that they had that sort of capability, but it also sort of brings up the area of transparency and responsibility with the technology that brands are using. Like, it's one thing to say our AI is so advanced that it's heightening your experience, and that's great. I think we all enjoy that. But then there's another level of, well, how else are you using it? And how are brands going to be able to strike that balance of transparency and responsibility with creating great customer experiences?
So this is something I've actually changed my mind on in the past couple of years.
Okay.
When AI was still quite new during the very early days of ChatGPT, it was considered a bit risky to overtly let customers know that you're using it, right? Because everyone was still pretty spooked by this. And I think that a big reason for that is we didn't really fully understand what it was or what its capabilities could be. But now I've shifted my thinking into total transparency is absolutely key. We as a mainstream society, I think, are starting to mature out of AI is coming for us mindset. And so now people just want to know, just be honest, be upfront. And so many companies still are not being transparent about their use of AI. And I think that's really a tremendous opportunity right now for brands to go a long way in building that trust factor with customers. I would say 99% of the time, hopefully, it's really not to creep you out.
Yeah.
It's genuinely to enhance efficiency and experiences. And I think customers are starting to come around to that line of thinking. Something I do expect to see a lot more of are publicized AI principles. So kind of like how companies share their vision, mission, company values, core values, and it's always posted somewhere on their website.
Right.
And it's going to be transparent, readily available information about a company's guidelines on AI, how they're using it, why they're using it. And I think guidelines is a key factor. That's the main word here. Right now, AI is kind of like the Wild West because it's still pretty new. And contrary to what some might believe, the Wild West was eventually tamed through law and order, right? And so I think regulations are coming, or at least stricter regulations are coming. There will be more laws in place around this stuff. But right now, it's really kind of up to the companies themselves to define those parameters. And whatever those parameters are need to be communicated to the customers. Because I think if they aren't, down the road, there really could be some litigious consequences.
I love that idea. Just saying, like, here's where we are as a brand, like a purpose statement or value statement.
Exactly.
And that's building trust too, right? Here's what we'll do, here's what we won't do. And just to have it clearly stated is super important. I know it probably varies, certainly by depending on the brand, depending on the organization, who their customers are. What might some of those guidelines be or tentpoles be that would be valuable to know from a brand? Like if you were the one composing, this is what we believe as far as how AI is used within our organization, what would some of those key points be?
I think one good place to start is if you are participating in data sharing, I always caution against sharing individuals' data. So instead of sharing data about this particular individual, even cross-departmentally, even if it's not cross-company or cross-industry, I always try to encourage whoever I'm working with to share data that's aggregated, data that maybe it applies to a segment, but not necessarily to one person. I think not only does that take away some of the creepy, some of the creepy aspects, it's more useful. I think it genuinely is more useful for companies to know, hey, this is how this specific segment likes to buy. This is how they purchase. These are their psychographics, rather than trying to focus down to an individual level. And you honestly bypass a lot of privacy issues and concerns when you really focus on data as a whole instead of that individual level. So that's one thing I think across industries and across companies that businesses can incorporate as one of their core pillars. I hesitate to name anything else because it really is very dependent on what you are using AI for in your particular use cases. I think that the key takeaway here is why and how you're using it, and those are the things that really need to be communicated.
No, that's very true. And I know that you recently wrote about this trend of organizations sharing customer data to other organizations to boost growth, which is also one of those things where I don't know how aware of that fact everybody is in their day-to-day lives, but it seems to be a little bit more understood, like, oh, okay, whatever this retail outlet is sharing about me to this brand of razors that I like. How does that get communicated in a way that makes it okay for me to feel that my data is safe? Something about what I'm doing from day to day or what I'm buying from day to day isn't just sold around everywhere. But are we just past that? Do we even care anymore? Or is it just like, well,
Honestly,
that's what happens?
well, I've done some research. I am a millennial, so obviously I know how millennials think, but
Sure.
also the Gen Zers and the alphas that are coming up. My stepkids, for instance, are in elementary school and they understand just innately that when they watch this YouTube video, they're going to get certain ads and based on what they've looked at elsewhere. And it's interesting to me because if you talk to some of the more established, I don't want to say older, more established generations, that is just something that is so foreign in their minds. But to kids these days who have iPads and iPods and cell phones and all
Right.
this stuff, that's just a fact of life. They don't even question it. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think is the debate. But I do think that with this new wave of consumers coming up, we are going to see a lot less fear in regards to data and a lot more understanding that, hey, like this is actually tailoring to my preferences and my behaviors as a potential customer. And in that way, I think it is very valuable. At the end of the day, if you want to reach your customers, you're going to have to generate your own data because I don't think that data buying is something that's going to get you very far or even is very sustainable because you can buy data from even matchless customers and it's still not going to be as valuable as that first party data that you capture on your own and your own organization. So I can't think of a time actually ever that I've recommended data buying. Maybe there is a use case for it. I've just never come across that personally. So I've always tried to really push for the first party data. And I think if you are willing to put in the work and energy and time up front and being able to collect that type of data, that's going to be what takes you into the future as a company. Yeah, I know that's a lot. That's an
No,
answer
my
that's
gosh,
a
I
lot
love it.
less geared towards consumers and a lot more geared towards organizations. But I do think that a lot of this onus should rest on the shoulders of organizations because they do have a lot of power. And if they're not responsible with it, it's not just the right thing to do. I think there really will be some litigious consequences coming down the pike. So being diligent, doing the work up front to make sure that you're capturing your own data and aggregating your own data is going to be the key moving forward.
I love it and absolutely agree. You're definitely preaching to the choir. I wanted to talk a little bit about the varying degrees or how we think about different industries and customer experience. You worked for one of the largest waste management companies in the world, right? I wondered when I found that out, I've never thought about waste management organizations and customer experience together. Like, I think about retail industry or
Right.
service industry, restaurants, travel, tech industry, of course. Never thought about customer experience in regards to waste management. Can you unpack that and tell me a little bit more about who the customer is there, what they're expecting in their experience, and sort of compare and contrast that with, what you might think of as a regular customer experience from a retail or any sort of other industry? How are those things similar and how are they different?
Yeah, well, I think number one, it's the least sexy industries that are the most vital. If you think about waste management, for example, imagine if we just stopped collecting your trash tomorrow. The world would devolve into actual chaos. So when you think of it from that perspective, it's very, very important to make sure that your humans are taken care of. And
Right.
again, at the end of the day, I think that's what customer experience is, making sure that your humans are taken care of. And if you need to use AI to do that, then I think there's a place for that.
I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. I like that.
Yeah. But I think that in the waste management industry, which, by the way, I was the first CX person at that company. So I kind of built this from the ground up. So I got to know it really, really well. A lot of people, myself included, before I worked in the industry, never thought about their trash. Like they never thought about how it actually works, the logistics, the operations of it. But when you get into the industry and you start working in it, you'll see that not only are there customer segments, but there are like sub-segments within those segments. So you have your commercial customers and your residential customers, right? Well, within the commercial customers, you have your regular waste and recycling pickup. You also have temporary dumpster for like construction sites, things like that. And then on the residential side, you've got your recycling customers, your waste customers. You've got customers that have curbside service. You have customers that have backdoor service. There's all these different segments within these subsegments, and the issues that a restaurant in New York City is facing are very vastly different than the issues that some residential HOA in Kentucky is facing,
Sure.
right? It's just very, very different customer bases and very different problems. So when you look at it from that perspective, I think if you have customers that face different issues, you probably need a CX professional in your organization because they're going to be able to take a step back while also zooming in on these specific processes, like I mentioned in the beginning with major intersections. For example, your commercial customers in the waste industry are very different than, the intersections that your residential customers are going to have.
Sure.
And vice versa, right? And so you need someone or a team of people managing those different intersections and those processes, regardless of what industry that you're in. One example that I do like to mention, because not a lot of people realize this, is so there's Waste Management, Republic Services, and Connections. Those are the top 3 in North America. And I worked at Connections, and we were the first out of the big 3 to come out with a mobile app.
Oh, wow.
So you're asking like how it's similar to retailers. That's a little more what you would consider traditionally customer experience focused. So we had an app where residential customers can download it. They can see their next pickup day. They can look up proper disposal methods for, because sometimes recycling can be very confusing. So they can look up different items to get proper disposal methods. They can pay their bill from the app. So we looked at, okay, this very specific segment, residential curbside, there's very specific things that they want to have at their fingertips readily available. And our call centers don't need to be getting calls about when a next pickup day is, because that's something that we can actually automate and have data pulled from CRM to this mobile app. And it doesn't have to be a manual process. It can be totally automated. And I know like that sounds very rudimentary, but in an industry like waste management, it's typically pretty revolutionary to come up with stuff like this.
No,
and
that's huge. And the time saving, just like they're not blowing up a call center asking these basic questions that are covered. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And again, I think that's something that really transcends industries, because I know, like every industry out there, your customers have questions and they're calling people trying to get the answer to these questions, and the ability to really think outside the box. How can we use technology, even AI, to reach people and answer this? That's something I just think it transcends industry, and it's going to continue to transcend industry.
You made me think of something, and a light bulb went off just now. I recently moved from North Carolina to Virginia, and the neighborhood that we're in now, it's not something I ever thought about. Our trash guys that drive around are the nicest guys ever. In the town that I lived in, North Carolina, I won't name the town, the city ran their waste management, and it was not great. They dump it in the truck, and then your can might be like in the yard or in the street, or there'd still be like trash around if it had fallen out of the can. It was just, it's kind of a bummer, but whatever.
Yeah. Right.
It is what it is, right? It's sort of shrug, I'll just deal with it. These guys here, it's a small company, has been family owned for like 80 years or something. And I know that because I've spoken to them on the phone. These guys always make sure that any trash around is picked up. If anything's dropped out, it's spotless. They pick up anything. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's inside the can or outside the can. I had a broken foot a couple months ago, and I'm out there on crutches, and I remember these guys saw me dragging my can down to the curb with my boot on my foot, and they got off the truck, they grabbed the can, they brought it down, dumped the trash out, and then brought the can back up my driveway. It was just like so kind. And every time I bring my toddler out there, he loves watching them pick up. They like honk the horn and they wave to him, and he's like, trash truck. It's such a cool experience. And these guys are creating a fantastic customer experience in waste management that didn't exist in any other waste management experiences I've ever had. So I celebrate those guys, and customer experience matters whether you're in retail, restaurants, or waste management.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first started in the industry, I was CX and marketing, right? So it was this very broad, undefined role that I had to kind of hammer
It's a
out.
lot, yeah.
I found that those stories, I mean, I could tell you stories about some of our guys who have literally like been there and seen an older lady fall and been able to call 911 and help her and stay with her, like saved lives. And so these stories really resonated with people when we told them on our social media, on our websites, wherever, way more than promos on get a month free of, waste and recycling when you sign up for our mobile app. People responded a lot more to these human stories, and they were so much more engaged in these human stories than they ever were in any other type of content that we produced. And I think that's just a really beautiful testament to how AI can be extremely useful, but it's not the end all be all of customer experience. And I don't think it's ever going to be, because at the end of the day, people love to hear stories about people. And that's what connects all of us and makes us different than the robots.
I 1,000% agree, and that does my soul so much good hearing you say that. I absolutely loved it. And I'm wondering, Bree, from your perspective, are there any brands out there you think of that just pop in your mind that are going like, oh man, they're doing a great job telling their brand story in a human way?
As far as brands who are actually doing a great job telling their brand story, the first one that comes to my mind is Patagonia. And it's really interesting because I think they have really purported this message of environmental sustainability and eco-friendliness to the point where that has almost become a bigger message that they want to share than buy our jackets, right? I remember actually seeing a commercial or an advertisement for Patagonia that was encouraging people to reuse their jackets. If your jacket rips, even if it's not a Patagonia jacket, we'll fix it. Send it to us, we'll fix it. If you absolutely have to buy a new jacket, we have a good one. You can buy it if you want, but please don't, because it's terrible for the environment. Just reuse the ones that you have. That really stuck with me. I really do think that's at the core of what they want to be as an organization. But I also think it's kind of brilliant marketing. Like, it's very non-traditional, outside the box. It's the difference between what I call head loyalty and heart loyalty.
Tell me more about that. Yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so head loyalty looks at a jacket and they say, oh, this fleece is warmer than this other fleece. I'm going to go with this brand. That's how they make their purchase decisions. Head loyalty is great in the short term until a warmer fleece comes along. And then it gets pretty fickle, right? Heart loyalty speaks directly to who a customer is at their core, and it becomes more of a commitment. I am buying Patagonia because I want to be a champion for the environment, for example. And that's something that goes way beyond warm fleece, right? That is the type of brand storytelling that truly does position the customers as the hero of the story, and the brand is just kind of the supporting character, which is brilliant. I mean, it's genius. And I really think if you can tap into that gut in your customers, that gut that tells you this is a good purchase for me to make, if you can tap into that and get access to that within your customers, you have them forever. Because at this point, they're not just buying because you've got warm fleece. They're buying because this is a statement about how they view themselves and what they want to be perceived as. That's very basic, and I know it's like marketing 101, but I think it's something that a lot of brands miss often. And they kind of go off these value props, which, again, in the short term might be great. But if you want a real long-lasting relationship with your customers.
Relationship is the key, exactly. And I love the way that you unpack that. And I think one of the keys there is what you touched on. They are making the customer the hero, not them. And I think it is to the detriment of brands who try to tell their brand story where they are the hero. I know that in your career, you have faced opposition from a lot of areas, probably a lot of people, a lot of circumstances. I'm wondering if you have any advice for anybody, either at any level of their career. What would you say to someone who's struggling to kind of find their voice in a room or in a circumstance that might be otherwise a little scary or a little terrifying or a little intimidating?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking. I know for me, it's been very interesting coming to this point in my career as a relatively young woman in almost exclusively male dominated industries. And that's been something I've had to battle. And more than anything, I think there's a lot of voices inside of me. And I think a lot of young women can probably relate to that just based on societal expectations and preconceived notions and misconceptions that you have to battle and overcome. Because if you can't do that within yourself, you can't really purport to be able to assert that type of confidence in those really intimidating settings.
Sure. Your wit and wisdom has made us all CX wiser. Bree, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really, really fun.